Hey, hey. So
That was a great
today,
talk. I'm glad we got to all that.
yeah, it was I was changed. I was transformed. That's all that matters.
Very good.
So today we have John Anderson, Dr. John Anderson, and we're going to get into all of that. I've been really looking forward to this conversation for probably a few years now.
Yeah,
It
me too.
just happened. So we're going to start with a poem that John wrote for me because I'm so beautiful. No, but really, I in prepping for this conversation, I sort of gave John a haiku prompt, or like as a joke, but also not a joke because it really does something. And I'm going to read that out loud as a kind of invocation, and then we're going to get into it. We're just going to get into the doorway that opens, and John will be able to, regale you with his lifeiness. So here we go. Gates close to wretches. Each ugly root moon toads dredge, lest graves dance on you. Not the typical haiku aesthetic that maybe people are accustomed to, which warms the cockles of my black heart. What was that about for you writing that? What was your process, and how do you feel about that now that I've, splattered it all over the public domain?
Well, I mean, I have to say I am an avowed goth kid. There was coffee and cloves probably and some Joy Division in there somewhere. I'm just, I grew up with that, and I never did write the poetry about smoking cloves and all that, but I've put my time in, and that little blurb is a poke or a nod, or a poke and a nod and a wink and a fuck you to some of these places where we want to be included in something bigger, and it just never seems to like sit right, or maybe we never seem to sit right within that bigger thing. And so we're sort of, if we don't get chased out outright, there are these little barbs, right? These little, like, yeah, you're doing okay, but it would be better if you could do da 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 da. If your posture were just so, or your feet moved a certain way, or you thought a certain way, or you liked a certain person or not, right? All of these things. We are all ghosts in training. We're all, we're ghosts in waiting, and we are wretches in a certain way. And the moon, if you listen to it the one way, can be this dirty ass bitch, or this really, beautiful thing. Not to give it this, like, virgin whore thing. That's not even really what I'm getting at. Not the dichotomy of it, but is what are you working to perceive?
Yeah.
And that work of perception is the thing that you must work into in the way that you can perceive. So it is that process of knowing, well, I can't do the thing you can do.
Right.
I don't have that perfect form.
Totally.
But if I light a candle and there's a glass of water and I make a call and something comes, I must be doing something okay.
Right. Yeah. Good. Yeah, one of the things that I really want to get into with someone who knows a bit about the subject matter, more than me, I would say, because I would say that both of us are terrible Taoists in a very particular
Oh,
kind of different
sure.
kind of way. And so I'm just going to flash up here the shiny, beautiful books that you have written.
Oh,
Um,
that's awful sweet of you.
Printed by our friend Jeremy up at Revelor Press, or down at Revelor Press, however you want to
Over yonder.
directionalize that, over yonder. One of the books is about ghosts and the way of the living ghost as sort of like a ghostly interpretation of the Tao Te Ching. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, that's correct. And then you have a second book called Opening the Vermilion Spirit, which I would sort of, give a hoot about. It's like returning the blood Shen dialogue back into sort of like prominence of the vitality. So you have this kind of ghost story mocking, but it's like that ZZ Top, or not ZZ Top, the really good mockumentary, that we all, I'm blanking on the name, but, if a ghost is very sincere, it's both comedy and tragedy, right?
Sure. Yeah. And most of that is timing too, right?
Yeah, totally. So it's this kind of comic, tragic experience of the ghost's perception of the Tao, right?
Yeah.
And this is kind of getting to something that I'm really interested in, is how you, or how a person perceives the mother or the Tao, or whatever you want to talk about, any of these concepts, right? Any of these amazing ancient concepts, right? Is never quite the thing itself, right? It's always based on the context of the being that is doing the perceiving.
Sure.
And so this idea that I want to get into you with is, essentially, how do two bad Taoists sort of dismantle the obvious ableism inside of Taoism, the obvious kind of ableist non-perfectionism, inside of Taoism, because it really lends itself to terrible things, It really is not the greatest. And I don't want to give answers as much as I want to sort of get muddy with you.
Yeah. I call that getting brackish.
Yeah, get brackish.
So I'm going to give you the standard orthodox line first. I do my best to indicate where something has been my experience versus what is orthodox practice. So I will do my best to say that over here it's done this way. I can't quite do that, or I have to do it this way. And so one of the first things that you were taught when you do start an established working with an established lineage is this movement away from the senses, this sort of pulling back from the sight and the sound and all the sound and fury stuff, as a means by which to settle out your emotive content that makes you angry or lusty, or all the bad things that human beings do, because we're bad human beings.
Yeah, we're real bad.
And so there's this immediate soft movement to pulling away from the senses as a means to pulling away from the rest of that, except when it's not. This is one of the first things that I address when I talk about that was for myself, is that paradox is the first thing you actually have to sit with. You don't reconcile it.
It's the first thing. Yeah.
You don't reconcile it. You just go, oh shit.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, now I know I'm in this body and I know I may be working toward a thing, but fuck, right? You have to just sit with this idea of paradox itself and just go, okay, I guess we're doing that. And then you can work from there. So there are standard practices and sort of scaffolding that you build on. But Okay, I use a manual wheelchair. I use it every day. It's part of my, the wheelchair I have right now is a piece of magical, equipment at this point. I've put enough chi into it and blood and whatever that it's a thing, and it's, has its own personality. And so that means that there are certain altar practices that I have to engage in a certain way. Like I can't have an altar that's way up here and get to it and do the thing with the thing without maybe burning the house down. And I'd rather keep my house. So as much as book says one thing, body says, hey, no, fuck you.
Yeah.
And you have to go with that as your set, as your beginning set. So maybe you can stretch things out eventually and you can begin to do some other things or that. But it is the internalized practice that you are doing that's the actual altar. You have a physical altar, but it is the doing of the thing over and over and over, even on a bad day. That's still cultivation. You will hear people say that you shouldn't show up to the altar unless you're ready to go and you're bright-eyed and you're bushy-tailed, and that's fine. If you do that, then good, but that means you're going to cultivate roughly every month or so. You're going to do altar work every month or so. And maybe sometimes it's when you are wretched on a given day that you need to show up and just do the thing. And maybe it wasn't great that day. Maybe that cultivation wasn't great, but you still got to do the thing. You don't have to like it, right? But you got to love it in that deeper way.
Right. You have to love the overall process of the kind of arc that you are exploring, I guess you would say. Because for me, it's like there's almost like there's two forms of everything, right? There's the kind of ultra humanist, like Superman and Superwoman idea of everything. You see this everywhere, Tantra and Taoism and everything in which there's some kind of hidden promise to improve your life or to fix you or to cure you. Anytime there's that in the field of whatever, you're going to get this kind of like hyper ableist kind of personality vortex thing that happens, right? Which is like people who do their Tai Chi for 2 hours a day every morning at dawn, and they don't miss a day. And it's like, okay, like there's people like that.
And they're still an asshole.
Yeah. They're still a person, but they have this capacity to kind of Navy SEALs their way through whatever spiritual practices are like whatever recipes they were given, right? And of course, you're always searching for the better, best recipe too, right? There's a problem in there too. It's like, well, this recipe isn't as good as that recipe. And it's like, well, fucking, okay, now we're on that rabbit hole. But then there's people who, so there's this kind of paragon of virtue bullshit thing that happens, which actually in some way turns off most people, because most people can't do that. So they go, well, if I can't do that, I just won't do any of it. And I'm not doing it right. So, there's this constant like, am I doing it right problem with meditation or non-conceptual, all the stuff, all the fucking names and habits, right? And, there's, to me, the essence of Taoism, Dzogchen, Tantra, whatever you want to call these clusters of ideas, is that they're available actually to everybody, regardless of the condition of the person.
Yeah.
But most people skip way over that part. They're like, that part isn't explicitly talked about in a lot of ways, because there's this hype train about the ableism, like, well, now I can balance on one foot, eyes closed for 14 hours, like I can do this Qigong practice. That's like, what does it do? Like there's
Yeah. I took a
Yeah.
poop today. I don't know about any of the rest of you. but
Yes, totally.
That's what I got. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right. And so I think the thing for me that comes up a lot is in sitting practice, actually, which on some level is pretty, not completely, but it's pretty accessible. But even for me, it's not actually accessible.
Mhm. Yeah.
You know, like I have scoliosis and all these other things going on, and it's like, so even in the best intentioned ways, the so-called non-ableist practice schemas are still ableist. That's what I've witnessed over and over and over again.
Yeah.
In the worlds of these worlds, you know?
Mhm. I, I just joked about it actually, but um, I'll tell people like, listen, if you only have 5 minutes a day to meditate and that's what you got, go get that. And I unironically, I'll say, you want to know how to do it? Do that after you've taken a shit. Like, that's literally waste being released from your body. That's chi being, taken out from the body. And often we are the most relaxed, or one of the most relaxed states after that takes place. So if that's what you've got, go do that. And if you've got cats, trying to get at the door, or kids or dogs, then you gotta you gotta shit with that. But yeah, I'm not here to tell anybody, literally anybody, that you got to do it for this amount of time or this, because we are monkey mind, right? We are going a billion miles an hour to nowhere and everywhere. We have in the internet the greatest repository of hyper and hypo everything. And so you have to find that space where you can. I don't worry too much about posture when I'm doing my work. I also do have scoliosis, and so and just the way that my bones literally sit doesn't lend itself to certain things. So I have a sitting cushion that I work with, and that's what I use. And I actually don't meditate very long, but I do it every day. Usually it's to get me ready to do other altar work or something. But there are things that you can do that, there are inner landscapes that don't really require that your spine is straight and your hips are in such and such a thing, and your knees are whatever. We do have an inner landscape that we can access even from our beds, if we should choose to, and if we're given some good pointers. Not, I wouldn't even say direction, but like bullet points.
Yeah.
So again, you just kind of have to work with where you are at, and then sit with it viscerally.
That's right.
Like, where in the body is this thing doing this thing? Treat it as a living thing. Treat it as its own entity if you need to. In Taoism, we have, body gods, 36,000 of this and that next thing. And I break it down actually into the five shen, the wu shen, which is common in modern Chinese medicine. But you can find them, reference to them, way back in the Zuochuan, so Warring States period, right? That five spirit model, it's been around for a long time. And that's how I approach them. And in a lot of Taoism, you do have the 36,000 body gods and all this, but before you have that, you've got this core group of five, whatevers, and they're both you and they're not you. They are human-ish, but they're not human. Like, the face of it's human. They're like, all spirits are like this. Remember when you were a kid and you had that, did you ever have that Play-Doh toy where you pushed Play-Doh through a thing and it made a shape?
Yeah.
That's what spirits are. Spirits
totally.
are things that are being pushed, extruded through this thing in a shape. but behind that little thing, there are huge, massive stuff that is more powerful than or at least more raw than we could give it a vision to.
Yeah.
This is why, if you go to the grimoire traditions, right, you show up in a comely manner that, that I will not be afraid and all these things. And that's cool. That's the face they're putting on for you. And that's nice of them to do that if they choose to.
Yeah, totally.
Which makes me utterly terrified that when something comes with 1,000 eyes and 18 wings and says, "Be not afraid," and that's the friendly face, what do you got going on behind the curtain, man? That is,
Yeah.
Cthulhu is like, whoa, I'm
Yeah.
here's your $5.
Yeah. Well, and I think, isn't it the funny thing that like the grotesquerie that we have come to think of things as grotesque, but the real meaning of grotesque was like hidden. It didn't mean like mutationally ugly or something, like it means something different now, but I like that it means both things. It both means what is hidden and what is the thing that like we kind of repulse from, like a leprosy kind of thing. But when we look at it in terms of like maybe the gods that we seek, like because we want something from them and we want to adore them, like we want to celebritize them, right? What if that celebrity behind the makeup is like really fucking something else, And I think I think that for me, the practice is getting closer and closer to the bone, as in like pulling back all the curtains and then finding more curtains, but then really like enjoying the process of doing so. Enjoying the process of going like, you showed up like this for me when I was 25, because that's all I could deal with. But I don't want to be that kind of person. So let me show up. And it has a real disability justice kind of bent to it, because you don't want to be that asshole who's like, well, I can't be friends with you now because now you're, like it's very real. It's like, well, now you've got long COVID and now you've got multiple sclerosis. It's like, like there's a reality though, that people do treat their spirituality like that. It's like they only want like perfect gods and angels and,
Well, here's the rub though. If you actually know your Taoist mythology and the mythos, like there's a whole menagerie of screwed up, quote unquote, screwed up things who become, different, changed in some way, and then they're elevated because damn it, they did the thing. One of the big ones that always sticks out to me is one of the 8 immortals uses a crutch. He's literally, a disabled person. One of the oldest emperors in Chinese culture, again, was a disabled being whose foot dragged the ground and created valleys and these things, very sort of Hephaestus, I think, kind of, Vulcan and this kind of thing. But the whole star stepping thing that people do in Taoism, that started because it was that walk is that way because it's a crippled, god emperor who's dragging his foot to make the line, to make the shape of the dipper kind of thing. And if I can't stand up to do that, but I can crawl, I can drag my knee across the ground. I can do the thing. It's going to look weird for you, but I don't care about what you think it looks like. Again, if I make a call and can connect to that stuff and go, hey, here I am, take me as I am, then it's okay. One of our colleagues actually works in one of the Afro-Caribbean traditions, right? And it's a possession-based work, right? So the spirits have to come in and they have to, if you're doing your work, then the spirits will come in and they'll inhabit you and they'll live through you and this. let me tell you, it's an odd thing to have a spirit kind of even remotely try to get into you, and then they have to go, oh, what is your body? Oh, this is a different body. And for them, it's kind of okay, because they're still spirits. Like they have the plasticity to sit in different bodies and go, oh, this is what your body does. This is new, right? It's us that try to make out into a, oh, well, okay, your posture's a little off, and you're maybe you're not breathing to the right count or whatever. I will tell you, if you're having trouble breathing while you're doing your work, slow it down or speed it up accordingly. You don't need to, there's no punishment for this, right? This is just how you have to approach the thing. So if you breathe at a count of 3 instead of 5 or whatever, go ahead. If you can do longer or whatever, then do that. If you can't get out of your chair, and I have the luxury of being able to do so, if you can't get out of your chair, just do it in your chair. Like treat your whatever vehicle you're using, means of conveyance, as part of your work. Like treat that as part of your equipment, right? Because let me tell you, if you've had equipment that's older than, I don't know, 2 months old, it's now ensouled. I hate to tell you, like it's already done. Its eyes and mouth have been opened, as it were. So that's now part of your work, and it's okay. And one of the jokes I made about this, the immortality rebellion, we were chatting.
Yeah, this is really interesting to me. I want to hear it. Yeah.
Oh man, I got issues with karma, man. I got some feelings.
Yeah.
About karma. Now, there are various kinds of karma in Taoism. One of them is tongfu, which is inherited burden, which is familial line, lineage, the stuff your great grandparents and your grandparents and your parents, the stuff that gets passed to you through your jing, through your essence. Yeah. This is kind of inherited burden stuff, but it's stuff you can, like, okay, I can trace my family tree back, and I can see that person was that kind of person, and so I can trace the line of movement there. Okay, so that's a form of karma in a broad sense. But karma with big K and you must have chosen this life for yourself, and I don't get that from most practitioners unless they're of the new age bent. I've literally had people tell me, oh, well, you chose to be disabled this time around, and then I summarily had to withhold my fist from their face. I don't want to be a violent person, but you go fuck yourself.
Totally.
Your karma is to have my fist in your face.
Yeah. Totally.
So anyway, so this whole idea of immortality as a form of perfection, right? This is what we're getting to as another branch of this whole perfection bit. The goal of really well cultivated forms of immortality are such that you take that on so that you can further cultivate. It's not so that you live to be 900 years old. It's so that you can keep doing the thing that hopefully makes the world a better place. That's part of the mythos, right? Is that the more you cultivate, the more you're putting out, good chi into the world, right? You're emanating this good stuff and the virtue. So the longer you're able to practice that, that's fine. I'm not gonna do that. Like I am not gonna I'm not going to cultivate in a way that's going to give me, 100,000 years of enlightened bliss. I'm an asshole, and
Totally.
I'm a human being, and I screw up. I'll do my best.
Right.
I will try to do better by human beings and by the world at large, because I view them as alive, right? Because all these things do, if I am a jerk, on a given day, I have to recognize that some of that went out into the world in some fashion. So what that means is maybe the next day I try a little bit better I try to calm
Even
down a
out
little
the
bit.
ratio.
You
Try
know,
to even out the ratio. Yeah.
yeah. And so I have this literally, part of me rebels against this idea of immortality and wanting to live, wanting to live forever. That thought terrifies me.
Yeah. That's not actually a great idea in my book.
That thought terrifies me. I mean, if you've read any of, Anne Rice's stuff back in the day,
Yeah, totally.
and that's like, oh, they've lived 1,000 years. 1,000 years actually isn't that much.
Yeah.
Live 100,000 years, and then tell me you're not going to be bored by about 2,000 years into it. Oh, geez, I'm waking up again. To maintain pure childlike curiosity for 100,000 years.
Yeah.
That's fucking cultivation. That's a thing. But I don't know that. I'm too crotchety. I'm a little bit, you damn kids get off my lawn,
Yeah,
so
totally.
I literally, there's part of me that literally thinks I'm going to start an immortality rebellion, also as a countermeasure to Extinction Rebellion, some of these more stranger emanations of popular culture, and these because the planet's going to go on, the earth is going to keep going, animals are going to do their thing, and plants are going to do their thing. They're going to look very different, but we're screwing ourselves out of the deal mostly, right? That's the thing. So yeah, immortality can
immortality can, the double bird. What's that? The two notches, right? From the two notches, which I think, what did I read about that? It really means, I think it's like an arrow to the neck, right?
Yeah. I can still shoot you, so I can still kill you.
I can still kill you because I can throw up the two notches.
That's the punk rock kid in me.
Totally. I mean, I have this same kind of feeling with the preponderance of fetish around cultivating the rainbow body, which is another version of immortality, which is just to say, at the moment of death, you can literally shoot your chi out the top of your head and crack your skull. And I'm not saying it's wrong. I actually think it's true, because I've seen some shit in my life which would say, well, if that stuff is true, this stuff is probably true too. I mean, whatever. I mean, I don't really, but the point I guess I'm trying to make here is, I think it's a kind of trick, because I think a lot of expert or very long time practitioners understand how fickle their student body is. I think that they know that in order, they have to do the carrot stick routine, it's like, well, the carrot is you can become like a superhero essentially and have this rainbow body thing. So I'm going to say that over and over so that you fucking practice, because the net benefit of practice is that you'll probably be a nicer person, and we need nicer people in the world. Right. So I'm sort of tricking my student body with this carrot of the rainbow body thing, which I think is really what's going on. But the thing that I hate about it is this kind of voracious identification with these symptoms of practice, rather than the actual practice. It's like, well, I know that I'm practicing well because I have some magical bullshit happening in my life. And it's like, that's not like being here, that's being special. There's a kind of special ableism now. You get this kind of paranormal ableism, you get this kind of like, well, I need to become immortal and have the rainbow body, otherwise I'm going to become a ghost. And it's like all of those, like trying to fix the broken machine of reality thing that's happening. It's kind of like a comedy, you know, it's like trying to solve something that is inherently like not actually broken. You just don't like it. You know, you just don't like that there's a thing called karma and disability and like weird shit that happens that you didn't choose and consent to. You know, like you're actually angry that the universe is basically not consensual, right? Like that's what
Right.
you're really angry at.
Yeah, most practice is just terror management. I mean, if we really come to it, like most practice where we think, if I only get there, then it's just terror management.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah.
If and you know, if you do your practice for a long period of time, you'll get into a groove and you'll do the thing, but it's boring if you're doing it right. I'm just doing the thing.
Yeah.
It's become so ingrained on that and that's okay. It doesn't have to do anything. So over the years I've had, I've done ghost huntings and these things, and I tend to be the sensitive person, whatever it is, and people will tell me like, oh, that's such a cool thing, I can't believe that's a great thing, I wish I had that ability. And I go, you do, for one, but secondly, it's not actually that impressive. Like, it's just people will get very hyped about talking about goo syndromes, and I just taught a long form seminar about this a couple weeks back, and everyone's like, yo, you can see such and such thing, and you can, yeah, and I have to wake up and do the dishes tomorrow. Like, none of that changes because you can talk to somebody over here. You still got to get the kids up and get them to school and feed yourself, or not. I suppose you can choose not to.
Yeah, sure.
But like, none of that's actually big time important.
Right.
This is why, like, if I'm dealing with ghosts, I'm more concerned with the ones who are alive. Like, that book, Way of the Living Ghost, is literally a handbook as to how to become one. In the woo woo chain rattling sense. Like, that's how to become one if you want to be.
Right.
And this does concern me because it makes it so that it's harder for people to change.
Yeah.
Once you die and that body is still left there, your Po is still doing its thing, like, you can change that, but you can't. Like, somebody else has to do work for you. And that's really difficult. It's a hell of a lot easier to do it here.
Right. Right.
So I don't care about all the extra stuff. Like, I have to be careful as to what I tell people I see or hear, or else I'd be called, whatever, some kind of pathological state. And above and beyond that, it's not that important on any given day. The sitting with your own body and sitting with the aches and pains and knowing I'm getting older, and that oh man, I can't do this thing like I used to do. Like, sitting with the fact that you're gonna die, right? That one day you will not have a consciousness, right? Some part of you might live on. I actually don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, this is something that I will readily admit. We actually don't know what's going to happen. Yeah. Scriptures and all these things aside, and even cultivation aside.
Right.
Maybe it works.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe it doesn't.
Maybe. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And so this long form life unto death, this is what we do know, right? As weird as it is, but so this is what we must work with.
Totally.
And this want to be Superman or Boba Fett or whoever the thing is, it's fine, but you're gonna get where I'm at. Like as much as I've had so many people over the years, they'll first thing they'll say is, don't take this the wrong way, but which absolutely means that it's a thing that I should take in the wrong way.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And then they'll say, man, I'm really glad I'm not in a wheelchair. And I go, okay, cool, man.
Sure.
But see, just wait a while,
Yeah,
just wait a while.
Yeah, we're all on the drip feed to disability, it's like.
But yeah, how do I take that personally? No, it's not my stuff.
Right, it's not your
Right.
stuff.
It's not my stuff.
Right.
It's their care and management.
Yeah, it's their care management. Yeah. And that's the interesting thing to me about cultivation in general, like all the nadon, all the I just call it like hygiene. It's like you're essentially like hedging your bet because, well, we don't know what's going to happen when we die. We have some ideas about it, and some of those ideas might be more or less accurate, whatever. But I think the thing that we kind of know is that you can have a death that in which your psyche is so messed up that you would not enjoy the process of that thing that's happening. Yeah. Like you could be really very angry and afraid and freaked out and confused. And we can go, well, okay, we could at least, if we'd have started sooner, we could have maybe, like we can look ahead and go, well, I don't want to die like that person, we can kind of backtrack and go, what are the things in me now that if they go unchecked is going to cause me to be like an absolute just batshit fucked up, have a bad trip in that moment. Like, cause I don't want to have a bad trip. If the trip is intense, it's one thing, but if it's bad, that's a different, it's like, well, and I think it's interesting too, that like, when I read a lot of these modern or sort of like restorative versions, because there's a big resurgence now to trying to like de kind of modernize modern Chinese medicine, right? Because we all know it went through this kind of like communist modernization process to kind of be a little less animist and a little more a little more Western minded.
You could say white.
Yeah, white, basically. Colonial, imperial kind of medicine. But what's interesting to me also is that like we're so far removed from what these ancient people actually were talking about, even though we have translations upon translations and kind of, we can even analyze the translations and be like, okay, so that translation is racist. We can do all that kind of stuff, right? We can have this kind of meta analysis. But what is interesting to me is not to kind of continually abstract the process, but to kind of go, well, I don't really know what it was like when you because there's no real way for me to really know what this person in this setting, in this time where there wasn't like all this, like they were living in a completely different reality. And they were still searching for something that was simpler and more relaxing and more like holistic of an experience, right? So that part's the same. But what gets me really kind of twisted is what I keep seeing is a kind of modernist, revisionist, fix-it mentality to all of these practices, because people aren't just willing to go, I'm terrified of X, and that's what everything I'm doing is actually about. Like I don't really care what the experience of non-conceptual meditation is like. I just wanted to solve this fucking existential dread problem that I have. But I'm not going to say that out loud. I'm instead going to abstract an abstraction about a medicine practice, like it gets really fucking bonkers.
Yeah, I'm on it with you.
And it's not accessible to like regular people at that point because it's not actually accessible. Like it's just not a thing you can access, right?
Right.
It's a kind of fear state driven by a lot of other fear states. And it gets to this kind of almost like labyrinthian puzzle
It,
box.
the
It's like
fear
a
state's
puzzle.
all the way down.
Yeah, and it's like a puzzle box of like, oh, I just wasted my time reading this because actually the person doing the work isn't really doing the work on some level, you know? And I sort of shy away from a lot of this stuff because it's really it just is a lot of distraction sometimes to the actual work.
So you know that I'm working on a third book, and I actually talk about a lot of this stuff in the process of within that third book, and I do take an animist approach to this, right? So when I say the five Shen, to me, there are literally five spirits that are hanging out in the body, and they circulate around, and they're kind of localized in the organs, although the organs are not the same thing as them, right? They're just localized there. But so when I do work with them, when I do work with the five Shen, and some of them are a bit more vocal than others, right? Some of them have more to say, and some of them are just quieter by nature. This is just normal. But there might be places where I might work with only one or two of them at a given time, in a given time period, because that's what comes up. But one of the processes that's there is that when you're doing cultivation, even within an animist framework, you're building that body within you, and you're thus building the relation with that thing. That's the animist part. It's not the body within you is not necessarily the important part. It's the relationship body that it's there. And so I almost don't worry about what the book says. I'm looking for some kind of visceral response, internal visceral response, that it's not my head.
That's right.
That oh, my psoas muscle just went bzzz, and
Yeah.
oh crap, that really, that's uncomfortable. Oh, hello, and then maybe there will be a conversation. There probably won't be. One of the things about any form of spirituality that I've encountered over the years, that everyone wants to, I'm going to invoke such and such a thing, and I'm going to let them sit in my body, and then I can be as powerful as Apollo, or such and such a thing. And all the boys or girls or lovers will like me, and this is great. But that God doesn't necessarily know you. Like, that's the shell of that spirit that you're saying is this doesn't know you, and it takes a bit just for you to learn the language of your own body, of your own spirits that are native to you, that you were born with. It literally takes time for you to to learn what they're saying, because their voice comes across different. The way that you're going to perceive it is different. You're given we're all given a tuner. We have a body, and we can tweak it. We can tune in Tokyo a little bit here or there, or as best we can. But a book can't convey that to you. Even a teacher, even in transmission, can't fully convey that to you, because they're not in your flesh, right? They're not in your body. So there is part of you which must also then be willing to call bullshit. Even on, if you feel the need to call bullshit on me right now, that's okay.
Yeah.
There, because I'm not in your body and you're not in mine, right?
Right.
So we can do the best we can, and we can approximate it. Language will help us do that. But the manual, uh, most of these manuals, by the way, they're very short. They're like, a couple of paragraphs. The length comes from the 3,000 years of commentary that everyone wants to tack on. Right. The manuals, the techniques are like, okay, imagine a little red baby in your chest, and just picture that. Just like picture that thing in detail.
Right.
And then do it again tomorrow, and then do it again tomorrow, and then do it again tomorrow.
Yep.
That's literally the technique.
Yeah.
And then, like, okay, do it at dawn. Sure.
Yep.
Okay. Or at sundown. That's literally the technique.
Right.
And this is more personal cultivation stuff. This is not necessarily the doing talismans and that the next thing, which is fine. It has its place.
Yeah.
But that's often an impediment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Going back to the what do you call it? The Shidas, the psychic abilities that you can get when you're starting to cultivate, that is considered an impediment in a lot of traditions.
Oh, totally.
That's like one of the first hurdles, because you think you're really hot shit. You've turned into Goku, and everyone's like, oh, I got it now. And then you, oh, wait, what? I stubbed my toe and I can't do the thing anymore?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because it's fragile, right?
Right.
So the techniques are great. Go do them. But sit within your own body when you're doing it. And if the book says this and your body doesn't do that thing, don't do that thing at first, or work to stretch that out so that later you can.
Yeah.
But start now. That's another thing. Don't wait until all the circumstances are just perfect, because you never fucking will.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that to me is the key endeavor here, is to go, everything you have to kind of walk into the forest knowing that everything is adaptational or adaptive everything's not just adaptive like some far off thing, but like it's adapting right now.
Yeah.
So like my body is adapting right now, my situation is adapting. So therefore there is no fixed circumstance of so-called practice, right? Like there is no fixation in general that people get caught in, because if you always have to be ready to adapt, essentially, then what even am practice? You know what I mean? Like at a certain level, it's like you just have a kind of loose idea and you go, okay, well, I'm going to see what happens. It's a kind of like seeing what happens process anyway.
Yeah.
And the 3,000 years of commentary is very funny, because now you have like, it's like you're stacking unreliable narrators in a game of telephone, because every single person is like an unreliable narrator, because they had some kind of agenda that they maybe got across or didn't get across, whatever. And then the next person has another agenda. And it's like, at a certain point, you're not really dealing with the kind of essence of the practice, which is relationality. You're dealing with this kind of like hall of mirrors of agendas that you didn't even ask if they were your agenda. Like you didn't actually go, well, is this person's, like, are we even on the fucking same page as far as like what we're trying to, explore or relate to?
Yeah.
And that's a thing that I think a lot of people it's very daunting too, because these practices are kind of steeped in mystery and also in a kind of proprietary protection racket at some level.
Sure. Sure.
There's like a protection racket. You have to do a lot of things to even to get the 2 paragraphs, and so now you're beholden to this kind of these kinds of bargains, these devil's bargains that you already have gone through before you even reach the practice.
That's literally baked into a lot of these frameworks, where karmically you're told, oh, well, you finally achieved a state where you're 1, human, and 2, you were now exposed to the writings or the techniques, or like literally that whole thing is like, oh, your karma was good enough this time. Good on you. You won the game.
Yeah,
Or you won the chance to be in the game. It's like The Price is Right, you know.
totally. You win the chance to be up at the podium. Yeah.
And it's a shit show. It's a weird cosmic shit show, and you with that even being said, you still gotta try, you know.
Yeah, totally.
You still gotta, you know,
Yeah.
try, or at least if you decide not to, just do it on purpose.
Yeah.
You know, if you know it's a dumpster fire and you're buying in, just go ahead and buy in.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Don't
Full
tell me otherwise. Like,
yeah, totally. Right. I mean, I think you hit on a thing that I tell a lot of people is like, we don't actually know what any of this does, but doing it on purpose will at least give you some kind of actual experience. You know?
yeah. And it may be completely grand. Like, you know, again, we might be selling it down right now because that's where we're sitting. Right?
Yeah, totally.
But it might be something that is like breaks the mind. It very well might be. But even the idea, again, there's that karma with a big K bit, you know, the fact that I just, oh, well, this time I happen to be in a country where I was rich enough to be able to afford the you know, monthly classes or whatever, and then they gave me the thing, and now I you know, I have the cognitive ability to read, and then okay, now my body is, yes, all of that thing must have lined up in there somewhere. But man, oh, it just gets my hackles up. I'm not a fan of that. Well, karmically, you did good enough this time, and man, just feed a homeless person. Like, give them some of your karma. If you've got some good karma this time, like, give somebody $10.
Yeah.
Even if you know they're going to go use, give it to them. Because you're not special. Like, none of us is special. And I think karma is often a means to explain why that person's got that thing and that person don't. I don't want to say it's just chance,
Right.
but man, there's like the punk rock kid in me is like, you know, fuck, you know, this kind of thing. You know, I just, it gets to me.
Yeah, I mean,
Really.
it gets to me too, because in some way it's another distraction. It's like we're looking for reasons that probably don't exist other than the generation of the reason that like we're looking for the thing that we are in the process of generating, you know, like, oh, I need a reason. It's like, well, why do you need a reason? You know, it's like it eats itself on some level. Like, I need an explanation for why I have these diseases. Well, you got bit by a tick or something. Who fucking knows? And then, to be honest, you know, I've lived with that for you know, decades. It's like, I don't know what's technically wrong with me. You know, like, and there's something at a certain point, I'm about to be like 43 years old. At a certain point, I think I finally got the joke. You know, the joke that tells the truth, which is like, searching for a cause isn't as important as relating to like the reality that you're sitting with, because it doesn't, if I never know, what will happen if I know?
You know, what will change if I
Like,
actually
what will,
find
you
out
know,
what the thing?
it's like, oh, is it because of this? It's like, well, it's a complex thing, and everyone's so concerned about like the bad thing their 14th removed grandfather did, which is why they now have cancer, you know, like it becomes this like, it becomes in more ways for like white supremacy to kind of feed on its own reflection on some level, which is like, I'm bad because somebody in my family was bad. And now, you know, it just, it doesn't really, it's not actually the story people think it is. Like, it's not actually a good story because it doesn't like break, it doesn't have like
It was a dark and stormy karma.
Yeah, it's like, for me, stories have to be wild enough that they can bleed through edges. You know, there has
Sure.
to be bleed through that isn't so self-contained, right? There has to be a way in which, like, the edge of the story meets a totally different story, and in between there's something that is kind of unexplainable or
Sure.
indescribably deviant, right? Like a very much like in between, where like weird mutants live in these weird places. And I think we like our stories to be sane, as in sanitized, right? We want this kind of
Okay.
sanity, sanitization, like the eugenics kind of model of mythology, you know?
Mm.
And it gets me to a place where, like, you know, for me, I'm rebelling against that, because there is, like, those kinds of sanitized stories aren't really, they to me are like living ghosts. These
Mhm.
sanitized narratives, oh, this is what ancestral trauma is about, but it's like, but you're only looking at like 4 ancestors. Like, what are we talking,
You
like,
got
you know, like
10,000 generations back, if you want to really get into it.
yeah,
Yeah.
so it gets to me that there is a way in which everyone's looking to clean it up, but the cleaning up is the eugenics. Like,
Yeah.
on some level, it can really become this.
It's the emperor's new trauma, right? It's
Yeah,
the,
totally.
it's that, like,
Yeah.
well, yeah. And I mean, this is the whole thing with trauma narratives now. I won't deny anyone their experience. If they've had bad shit happen, like, life is terrible for some people. Like, life is shitty to some people. Maybe even most people, right? But if you explore that, whatever that, the nexus point of whatever that trauma is, if you actually do dig into it, what are you going to do with it if you get it?
Yeah.
That's like a dog finally catching the car. Like, well, okay. And this is again where at least in the framework that I work with, your internal spirits are kind of your allies there too, if they're in an okay enough shape to do it. Because if this is that meme, if they're cold, if you're cold, they're cold too. If you're traumatized, they're traumatized too, right?
Sure.
But you can work with your spirits in a way that is not your language, right? We want to do the thing in the way that our brain gets around it. So we want to intellectualize it. We want to get into the psychology of it, and the complexes and the archetypes and all this. Fine. But if you really want to get in it and begin to pick apart the knot, you're going to do some unhuman stuff. You're going to have to do some unnormal stuff. You're going to do some shit. And it's going to, you're going to, at a certain point, you're going to probably look back and go, what the hell was I doing? What is that thing? So the need to track back your, whatever that nexus point of karma or trauma or whatever, it's use, it can be useful to strip away layers. But again, if you get to the knot of it, what you going to do then?
Yeah.
Where you going to go?
Yeah, totally. And I'm curious, how do you see what we're talking about now as related to sort of like what you teach about goose syndrome? Because ever since Heiner Freihoff, whatever his name is, Heiner Freihoff, whatever.
I go with Fruhoff. I go with the hard U.
Yeah, Freihoff. Whatever. It's like, since COVID has been a thing that is kind of the ghost in the machine that we can't really ignore, even those people are trying to ignore it.
Sure.
We've got kind of a new resurgence of like, well, maybe these ancient medicine knowledges knew something about what's happening, and we can kind of go, oh, right, so all these perniciously strange syndromes, we can call them goo, they're goo disorders or whatever. But I'm curious about your take on it, because you just said you taught a class on it, and also you're teaching it to people who like kind of want to be doctors, right? So it's not just a conceptual philosophy. It's like, well, now you got to do something with the philosophy. So how do you see this? Like, what is, is this connected to what we're talking about here? This kind of like looking for trauma, but when you catch it, you don't know what the fuck to do with it?
Well, the short answer is yes. There are certain things that I cannot talk about within that setting. This teaching seminars at one of the schools of Chinese medicine. I have to meet certain criteria and guidelines, and that's why I can't go talking all that much about ghosts or
we don't talk about Bruno. We can't
right.
talk about Bruno.
Yeah, for sure. So I have to, in the way that I view goo, it's a spectrum of material, which is chronic, parasitic. That's a major component of it. It's not just that it's a disease that causes symptoms, right? It's that it takes away your jing and your qi and your shen. It eats them. That's what goo does. But in order for it to be goo, it has to be there for a long period of time, right? So if you get tapeworm and you get it treated fairly quickly and it resolves, while that's a parasite, it's not really goo. It doesn't have time to become entrenched in your being, right? If you mentioned Lyme's disease, and Lyme's disease is one of the more popular modern diagnostic categories that gets lumped under goo. But if you have Lyme's disease and it really gets in there and does its thing, is it a parasite in the way that most people would understand parasites? No, it maybe not stealing the food, but man, it takes away my will to live on a given day. It takes away my ability to concentrate on the world and be present in it, right? So that's taking the shen. That's taking the shen with a big S, spirit, this kind of thing. And so there is this process of you could have a parasite that's in you that isn't goo. You could have a ghost attached to you that doesn't really take much from you. It's not really goo then. You may have an ancestor or something that's attached to you, and it maybe it takes a bit from you, and okay, that's not super bad insofar it doesn't really change your awareness of the world, right? That's not goo, right? But you can also have, oh man, we came up against this set of ideas a lot, and I had to literally be like, yes, I want to address that, but I can't do it here. Because we talked about modern culture and like, what about advertising and adbusters and Stuff Central and Wetiko and this kind of like, pop culture will eat itself and we're okay with that, rah, rah, rah. Is that goo? And I would say both. No, but as well as yes and at the same time. And we come back to paradox, right? We come back to the fundamental process of it.
Right.
For me, a lot of what people want to call goo is sort of a miasmatic structure. And one of the older forms of goo is this idea of miasms, which, if you don't know what that means, miasms are basically bad air, evil air. You go into a graveyard and you're going to pick up some ghosty thing, but it's not really a ghost. It's just the chi of the graveyard will transmit to you. And so I don't consider that to be goo in and of itself as much as a place in which goo is likely to be. So just because you like McDonald's doesn't necessarily mean that, like, oh, that McDonald's, the advertisement structure of McDonald's is a goo form. You're more likely to find goo if you keep doing these things and consume this and this and this. You're more likely to have access to it. But I have to draw some lines, or else it's all going to be goo.
Right,
It's all parasites all the time.
right.
And the MTV logo flashes in the background, and video killed the radio star or whatever. But that's the thing, is we have to have some kind of excluding criteria, or else fuck it, we're parasites.
Yeah,
we
totally.
ourselves are goo.
Yeah, I'm goo. Yeah.
So this is a tricky thing, and this is, I think, part of the process of, for each practitioner, they have to find out what goo means for them. Because I do know practitioners who actually both do the medicine, and they're also cultivators in traditions, and they've said, listen, like, I just made friends with goo. I know I have it.
Right.
I just came into relationship with it. And so there is that thrust too, right? There is that, well, fuck, I got ghosts, maybe I should do cocaine about it, or
Yeah.
I can come into relationship with them, and maybe then I can give them a space that is not in my body, but at which I can take care of them or give them some of what they need.
Right.
And so there is also that part that that could be another huge seminar thing in its own right. I'm thinking about doing a longer form, an even longer form course for folk magic-y people to deal with goo on some of these other sides too. Because I mean, we do have to deal with the fact that the parts of the internet are fucking alive, and
Totally.
they, your attention is consumed.
Yeah.
I wrote essays about this maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and people were like, okay, man, okay, well, if you don't understand what I'm getting to, then I can't explain it to you.
Right.
And yeah, you have to come to the realization that, like, okay, am I going to eat whatever that is? Am I going to consume that thing? Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I need to stop scrolling on ye old Facebook or whatever algorithm driven,
Right. You have
thing.
to be able to, I think it's like there's like these atmospheric layers of goo, in my estimation. It's like you have like the goo that is like very much a kind of bodily attack kind of thing, which means you need to change your diet, your lifestyle. You probably need to take some special medicine. You probably need to do some inner work. But then that immediately gets to these kind of egregoric layers of like, yeah, so I wrote the name of the goo on a piece of paper and I put it in a magic circle and I gave it tobacco. Like it gets to these places, right, where you're like, I still have the symptoms, but I don't feel so suicidal anymore.
Sure.
So you get these kinds of teasing apart of like, because for me, I think the thing that you said earlier is what I think goo really has the capacity to do, which is why we do all this terror management, right? Like, what is the reason we have terror management? I think it's because people know how fragile their psyche is when enough stress is in the system, and you stop being able to play and learn, which is equal to change. You stop being able to perceive differently. So goo is kind of like suddenly you can't hear and you can't see, or you can hear and you can see, but it's only the same three things.
Yeah. The things that you are hearing are not what are going on, or only what you think are going on.
Right. It's almost like a filtration or a location process in which the goo starts to hijack your emotional cognition, so that you actually paint everything in that same color, like all of my relationships are out to get me or whatever. And so, we can work on it on all these levels, but on some level, I think we have to understand, like, we need a better, I don't know, ontology of goo that isn't so, like what you are saying is like, I can tell in this group of students, I can say some of the story because
Sure.
there's actually goo inside of the university that won't let me talk about it. Like there's a way in which there is a kind of, we don't want to open that Pandora's box.
Right.
So you can't say it here, but then if they want part 2, they have to like go to your private seminar or something, It's
Right. Which to be clear, I do not have one. I'm not
Yeah.
trying to market it.
No, I get it.
But
I'm
if you all have interest for it, let me know.
Yeah, totally. And I think there is interest, but I think, it's the things that like I'm trying to teach people too. It's like, you want to get to this part of the story because you think that this part of the story has the buried treasure, right? Like when I did my death practice group, I knew that a lot of people would only be coming because they wanted to heal their ancestral trauma. Like I had the kind of message from heaven about that, right?
Sure.
And so when I did it, I was like, I don't know when this session will be, but it certainly won't be the first session. And it ended up being like session 5, because actually to get to this so-called buried treasure, I had to try my very best to try to show you that it wasn't buried, like I had to kind of go, yeah, you're kind of mistaken about the narrative here. And I think goo is like that. It makes us believe a lot of things that are actually at odds with our contentment and are at odds with our relationality. Like to be able to just be able to like chill out, like it's actually at odds with that process of chilling out and like feeling the vibe, like these things that we kind of do as humans when we're okay, is that we can chill out together, we can vibe together, and we can disagree without it becoming World War III. Like these are kind of normal things, right? It's like I can disagree, but that doesn't mean suddenly I hate you and I'm going to cancel you. And now, like it's not this crazy thing. It's just disagreement, and I walk away for like a few hours or something, So it's interesting to me because it's like I think we're all in the goo now, like in a weird like America goo land is really a thing. And it's in the internet, like it's like riding the carrier wave of our worldview, but I also think that if we jump specifically to the weird parts without grounding it in a kind of hygiene-based, disabled justice-based reality matrix, then it's just going to get more goo, because that's kind of the thing that people aren't really, they're not grokking that like, yeah, it's getting worse because you're not like, you don't love yourself. Like on some level, it's not like loving yourself will cure the goo, right? It's not that kind of thing. But there is a sense of like, if you loved yourself more, you could maybe relate to it differently, and some of the symptoms would change, but we can't say which ones because it's not up to any of us to know.
Yeah.
Right? It's very magical.
That's for you to know. That's between you and your goo.
That's right. Exactly. Just like between you and your 5 Shen, right? It's like there is a kind of intimacy that is really not marketable. Like you can't really say, well, I can give you exactly what I've gotten. Like you can't, and that goes back to the cultivation part, right? Like you really can't promise people things at a certain point in the game.
Not when it comes to that. No.
Right.
I mean, and this idea, we can circle that back to the Taoist hygiene stuff. I mean, it's directly seen in like the 3 corpse worms and this kind of the three body corpses that again were born with them, and they get us to do all this bad behavior, but then they tell on us for the bad behaviors that they told us that we should do. So what do you do with them? You don't talk to them. You take some stuff to purge them out, and then you can become an enlightened being. because now you don't have these baddies sitting in you to do all this stuff. But it needs to be said that in that cosmology, they're part of the bureaucracy.
Yeah.
They're literally they're plants. They're literally planted. You know, they're turncoats that heaven's like, let's see if we can do an answer to Job thing to everyone. You know, that's the real bitch of it. It's just, oh well, you should get rid of those, but they're still part of the cosmic process.
Right. Yeah, there is a kind of like, and this gets into stuff about Wachiko too. It's like it can easily become another boogeyman for whiteness to kind of distract itself with. Or can you get to a place where you just go, well, I just need the right diplomatic kind of like negotiation process.
Yeah.
It's like, I can't eradicate what has been put here by creator. It's
Yeah.
not, you can't play, like, that's not part of what the options are here. It's not like, exile in prison. It's not like, but what you can do is you can kind of have a kind of almost like Iroquois Confederacy kind of model with it. It's like, when you come to town, the bells are going to ring and we're going to, like there's a real protocol for interaction and engagement. And I think that, obviously, because we live here in this society, we do look to these other models of reality, in order to sort of maybe reclaim some of the protocols we didn't know we lost,
Yeah.
And I think,
just the exorcistic process. And here I literally mean the work of exorcising unwanted spirit forms, right?
Yeah.
That looks very different in the Western culture than it does in the East.
Right.
In the East, the first thing you do is say, hey, did you know you're in a body and you shouldn't be there?
Yeah, totally.
Like, just in case you got lost and and then the next one is, hey, well, you shouldn't be in that body. What can we do to maybe make this right? What can we do to maybe shift you into a place where, what do I have to do to get you out of this body? It's that kind of thing. And then only at the end are the hard, the hard on for the, oh, well, I'm going to call so-and-so the Lord of so-and-so, and they're going to call their 10,000 legions of so-and-so.
Yeah.
That's only the very back end of it, where you're really just trying to you're trying to ramp things down the whole time. You're trying to talk to the drunk guy in the bar by talking him down and buying him a beer,
right.
rather than,
Yeah, totally.
rather than Roadhouse,
Exactly. Like there is and I do think that if I'm interested in anything, I'm interested in this kind of, where you get to increase the options of engagement with any being. It's like,
sure,
you get to play while you maybe have a little bit of fight, like maybe there's a bit of like, this is not, I don't really like the situation. This person is like little, like you can have all of that, mood spice, it's like mood spice. It's like, well, I don't really love this person, but what you're at least trying to do with spirits, with, the five Shen, with other, with all the beings, whatever the fuck, is you're at least trying to be able to maintain your dignity to be able to play within the process of trying to figure out some kind of next step, right?
Yeah, hopefully consensual, process where it's, everybody has some kind of input.
Yeah, and maybe it's not all balanced and equal, because I think that's also the other thing is like we start to go, well, democracy means, it's like, no, it's not that kind of democracy. It's not the kind of bullshit democracy where even the demon ghost who wants to eat all the children gets an equal vote. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. I always tell people, like, the idea of balance, especially your yin and yang, people can relate to that. The balance of yin and yang is, if it's 50-50, you're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Yin and yang are, at best a controlled seesaw,
Yeah.
where they're sort of doing this thing and they're counterbalancing, but they're still moving.
Yeah.
And sometimes you'll have a prevalence of one, and it's natural. And sometimes you will have a prevalence of the other, and it's natural. The key is to how well can you keep them roughly balanced, but still moving.
Right.
And there are times when you got to go down in the shit. You've got to go down and do some really mucky, nasty stuff. And it's not crystal light and healing, and it's it's not Reiki. And if you get enough Reiki, you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
Nope.
Nope. Totally.
And likewise, it's also not, gonna go to the graveyard and gonna dig up some grave dirt, and then there's some chicken blood, and could be, but it doesn't always have to be that way.
Yeah.
Sometimes it do be that way.
Yeah, totally.
Uh,
So in kind of closing, what I wanted to ask you was like, and this could, this doesn't have to be like a canned or a perfect response, but it's more like, in your personal exploration of all the things that you're exploring, what are the edges that are really, interesting you right now? Like, you don't have answers for these questions, but you're really asking the questions.
well, broadly speaking, what the hell's the point?
Mm-hmm.
Broadly speaking, that's one of them. I am very curious as to how things are going to be in the next 30, 50 years. I'm not somebody who actually does a whole lot of divination or any of that. I think there's a divinatory impulse, and I think that can be useful. If you know what you're going to bring the fuck back with you from that future time.
Yeah.
I talk about that, in the next volume too.
Yeah.
But yeah, this idea of how can I balance being an observer of the world and a participant in it, with trying to change it in a way that I feel is also appropriate, and keeping that middle distance a little bit, keeping that space to where I'm not feeling the ultra rage of the newest thing on Facebook or whatever it is, or I literally have to practice this nearly every day, because I'll meet with someone and then they'll be like, did you read the so-and-so? And I go, nope.
Yeah.
Oh, did you watch this episode of it? Nope. You mean you haven't watched it? Nope.
No. Yeah.
Because that's part of my hygiene, right? That's the hygiene that we can do something about. This, like, what do I want to expose myself to? And I don't mean, okay, well, read only the things you agree with, right? But if you're going to go into a space where maybe it's hostile to your ideas, limit it to 20 minutes or a few songs, right? Limit it to, choose your level of participation in everything.
Yeah.
And treat everything as if you should be choosing your level of participation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If it's time to duck out, go. And if it's time to defend your stance, okay, if you have to.
Yeah.
I actually don't have that very often, because I don't have any hills I want to die on. I really don't.
Right.
I have my ideals.
Yeah.
And I can practice them as I see fit. But I'm not going to tell you. That's not your business.
Yeah, totally.
And guess what? your ideas, I don't really care. Like in,
Yeah.
in the grand scheme of things, the whole like, oh, the world should be run this way. Neither of us fucking knows. None of us does. We're doing the best we can. So while we're here, why don't we treat each other well? Not nicely, but well.
Right. Yeah.
Right? Why don't make sure that people get what they need and to the best that their selves can deal with it.
Mhm.
But I'm not gonna play nice with everybody all the time.
Mhm.
You get some dice in my hand and a character sheet, and I'm gonna be a jerk. I
Yeah.
can guarantee it. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's the perfect outlet for that spirit that needs that expression, it's like there is, if we're going to be living as these deviants, chimeric, goo infested ships, ghost ships, if that's partially on some level what we might be, karmically, right? A kind of ship of ghosts or something, then I think it is at a certain point, at least for me, it gets to this place where I at least want the vibe to be chill and cool. So like if that means every now and then I have to play an asshole on TV, but I know that it's not the whole story, it's just kind of game that I'm playing. I think that, the gamesmanship of it gets to be more interesting for me. Like there's a gamesmanship to kind of surviving and becoming more and more disabled as we survive, like there is a game, it's really real,
yeah,
it's like,
for
well,
real.
I mean, if the longer this goes on, I think the worse it kind of gets, you know what I mean? Like it gets a little,
Yeah, yeah. The last session is definitely you just don't wake up that day. So,
yeah,
uh,
totally. Yeah.
yeah. Have you ever read Finite and Infinite Games? Have you read it?
No, I have not. I have not.
Oh, you should pick up a copy. I
Okay.
think you'd enjoy it. It comes from this brand of 1970s self-realization stuff, right?
Yeah, like
Uh,
The Werner Eckhart kind of vibe, right?
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah,
But it's literally about games theory.
yeah.
It's literally like, and here's this idea of reality in the form of a game.
Yep.
Um, Great little book. If you haven't checked it out, I'd go to the library. If you probably find it at the
Totally.
library.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, I think it's trickled into at least enough of my, like it's part of popular culture enough now. Because what you really do is you want to play the infinite game. It's like you don't want to stop the music. You just want the music to continue, you know.
I don't know if I'm bored with the music, man. I'm there again. This
Oh,
immortality rebellion.
totally.
I I don't know.
Yeah.
It is Christmas season, so Mariah Carey is a coming.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
she's coming. She's coming strong.
uh,
I mean, that's the game too, is like to be able to enjoy the game you don't like in measured doses. You're
sure.
like, well,
Because guess what? You're probably going to be playing it whether you like it or not.
yeah,
At some
totally.
point,
Right. It's like,
you're gonna get roped into a game you don't necessarily like.
yeah, so you kind of have to have this kind of vibe that's going on where you can kind of, it's like you'll play a hand, but you won't play through the night. It's like you have to know when to put them down,
Sure.
Just go play a different game. Well, this has been pretty rad.
Oh, I've enjoyed the hell out of it.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on, and we'll continue if things feel good to continue. I know there's more that people probably want to hear about. Maybe we'll field some questions from audience members. So I'm just saying that now because if you have questions for John, you can send them in. We might not answer them, but it would be nice to have them. I think
Yeah.
for me personally, what I'm still interested in, just because I'm a terrible Taoist, is the five spirits or the five Shen, I roughly know about them. I do kind of practice, but they're not as obviously present as some of the other spiritual models that I've used. It's,
Yeah.
and so I'm kind of trying to figure out, like, are there better practices to get those five spirits to talk to me Or are they already talking through these other models that I've already integrated? You
Yeah.
know, like I'm very curious about that whole setup, the 5 Shen and stuff like that.
So I'm working to flesh that out. That's literally the whole third book is about how to work the 5 Shen and all these different kind of ideas.
Good.
It'll be a setup as the kind of a dialogue between the two beings, as in the second book.
Mhm.
It's actually a continuation of this. The third book was stuff that didn't make it into the second book,
Okay.
so I would have had a gigantic tome if I'd have done that.
Yeah,
So it's literally the same two folks, and it's set up in a sort of a you know, this passage is about this, and this passage is about this. And so it's the same thing, but in the process of that, there's also going to be a here's what that means for practice, and here's what, and then here's the secret to this one is like you got to read the footnotes.
Yeah.
Because the footnotes is where I go, okay, but what I do is blah, 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 and here's how it's worked out for me.
Yeah, totally.
So I'm not going to tell you that stuff because it's not important for you to necessarily know how it worked out for me unless you want to.
Yeah.
But I also have, because I have a different way of being in the world, being in a wheelchair, being in relation to space in the way that I am, it means that my Shen don't, they're going to be inherently different than yours.
Yeah.
So I can sort of talk in the neighborhood, get you in the ballpark,
Right.
but then you must also then find out what that is for you.
Yeah.
And not all 5 of them are going to be as loud as the others.
Yeah. Yeah.
The E, which is the spirit of the earth phase, and the Zur, which is the spirit of the water phase, those tend to be very quiet, very deep things because of the nature of what they are. They're manifestations of the earth phase. They're manifestations of the water phase. So it's, the easiest one to talk to is the singular Shen, the fire spirit, because that's you regularly. That's your awareness as we're sitting now. My Shen and your Shen right now are doing a thing. We're playing because we're having this relation. The Po and the Hun are the only 2 of the 5 that actually have what we would consider to be distinct agency outside of ourselves. So you can work all 5 of them, but some of them are going to look cooler than the others, and that's a trap.
Yeah, that's a trap. That's the trap. Yeah. Totally. Cool. Well, more to be continued. I'll put all of John's links and the way to get the books and stuff in the show notes and all that stuff. But yeah, it's been a blast. Anything you want to say to close us out?
Well, I would like to finish with the last couple lines of the bit that I sent you, and that is
Yeah.
And lo, there is fuckery afoot.
Yes. We'll put that in the show notes too, the complete poem and commentary. All right. Well, I'm gonna press stop on the recording. So thank you all so much. See you on the flip side.
Thanks, friends.